Hi there, I just want to take this opportunity to share a little thought that will hopefully bring some encouragement. So this thought actually started with a conversation that I had with a friend last week, and we were talking about how one of the most difficult challenges at this time is the uncertainty that we're facing. So we just have lots of questions that there don't seem to be answers to yet. So we might be thinking, when will this come to an end? Or how will this all come to an end? How will we get to the point where we feel safe enough to go about our normal lives? Or if we can't return to the normal we knew, then what will the future look like? And I suppose all these questions without answers and this uncertainty kind of brings with it a sense of anxiety and even fear as we look into a future that is unknown to all of us. And so I just wanted to actually share a little story to encourage, which comes from a time when my family were experiencing some uncertainty. And it was actually about the time when my mum was going through cancer treatment. And I have told this story before, so you might have heard it already, apologies. But just over 3 years ago it is now, my mum had the diagnosis following some tests and a biopsy of lymphoma, which is blood cancer. And I remember the moment that we had the phone call. Mum had been to see the consultant, and I was actually with Sarah at the park, my sister. The children were playing, and Mum called to let us know the news. And as you will know, if you've been in a similar situation, there are many feelings and emotions that kind of flood through you at that point. But I do remember distinctly that suddenly the ground felt a little less stable, and I guess that I was cast, or as a family we were cast into kind of the realm of the uncertain, not knowing what was going to be ahead of us, and particularly what Mum was going to have to face. And I remember it being a bit like a merry-go-round in my head of questions that didn't have answers, and I remember that it wasn't a particularly great ride to be on. But leading up to that point, I'd actually read an article which had a quote from someone called Charles Stanley, and in essence the quote said this. It said that during troubled times and uncertainties, you can choose to walk the path of fear, or you can choose to walk the path of faith, but you can't do both. And I remember talking to Sarah, and we were just talking about how actually that we did not want to walk in a path of fear. We didn't want to give in to that fear, and actually what we needed as a family was to walk in faith. And Mum was really brave leading up to that point with the kind of the tests and the biopsy and all that she had to go through, and then leading into her kind of the start of her treatment. And we really felt as a family that God's presence was with us, and we felt his peace. But there was just one procedure in particular that kind of, if I can describe it as this, it kind of just stopped Mum in her tracks a bit. And that was when they said that they wanted to put a peg in Mum's arm, which is so that they could draw blood and put the chemo in more easily without trying to find a vein every time. And this procedure, which of course they have to tell you about in great detail and tell you the pros and the cons, it just caused Mum a great deal of anxiety over whether to have it, and also the thought of what it was going to be, this tube inserted into her arm that kind of goes up her arm and then stops just above her heart. It just made her feel really fearful, gave her sleepless nights, and kind of robbed a little bit of her peace, even to the point where she was kind of questioning whether it was the right thing to do, and just really unsure. But eventually she decided that, if the consultant thought that would be best, that she would go ahead with it. So on the morning of the procedure, we'd arranged that Sarah would take the children to school and I would take Mum to the hospital. It was a 9 o'clock appointment. And even in the car, I could tell Mum was just really anxious, and she was a bit agitated by it. It was very quiet, not like Mum. Sorry, Mum. And we got to the hospital, and even when we got to the hospital, she kind of looked at me and she said, "I don't know if I want to do this." And I said, "Well, we can go," but we decided that actually that's what she would do. She would go in. So we parked the car, went into the hospital, and went to the desk to register Mum. So they took Mum's name and told us just to sit and wait for a moment, which we did. We got there just maybe a couple of minutes to 9, so it was perfect. So we sat there for a while, and then a lady came down, a nurse came down and said for us to follow. So I remember walking down the corridor into another little ward, and there were a few cubicles which were kind of cordoned off with curtains, and then there was also this little group of nurses who were huddled around a clipboard. And as we walked in, they kind of all looked up and they went, "Ah," and one of them said, "Ah, you're Gillian Pearce." And me and Mum looked at each other, and the rest of the nurses were all smiling and nodding. And they said, "Have you just got here?" So we said, "Yes, we just parked the car, we just got here a few minutes ago and we've just been waiting." And they said, "So you didn't come here earlier, you've just got here?" And at this point, me and Mum thought, "Oh dear, maybe we were late and we got the appointment time wrong." And we said again, "No, we have just arrived, sorry, are we late?" And the nurse said, "Oh no, you're not, it's 9 o'clock. She said, "It's just a strange thing happened." She said that about 20 minutes ago, she said, someone came in here and told us that Gillian Pearce was here and she was ready for her appointment. So she said, "So I went outside to the waiting room. I couldn't find you anywhere. I looked around, but no one had seen you. So I came back." And we said, "Well, that's strange because we've just arrived." And the nurses started talking about it. And they were saying that it was somebody who was wearing scrubs, but they'd not seen this man before. And they said to us even, "You didn't come with anybody else?" And we said, no, we've literally just arrived. And at this point, they kind of started laughing and they sort of said, "Oh, maybe it was a ghost." And as me and Mum kind of were ushered into the little cubicle, I turned to Mum and Mum turned to me and I said, "Mum, maybe it was an angel." Now, was it an angel? I don't know how else to explain that someone unknown to the hospital, unknown to us, came in to that room and said that Gillian Pearce is waiting for her appointment, to the point that someone had gone looking for her, and when we arrived it was like a little welcoming committee really. But I do know that as we went into that little cubicle and Mum got her phone out and she looked at a message that Sarah, my sister, had sent her the night before with a Bible verse that actually came from Deuteronomy 31 verse 8. And this little verse that kind of was a version of that little prayer was a version of that verse. It said, "For my God is with me and he goes before me. I do not fear because I am his." And all I can tell you was that in that moment, in that little cubicle where there had been anxiety and fear about what was ahead, suddenly there was a sense of God's peace. And it just felt like God was saying, "Look, don't worry. Like, I've gone before you. I've gone ahead of you and I'm going to be with you through it all." And God was with Mum and the procedure went well. And, from that point, he's really been with us all as a family, and thankfully Mum is well now and she's come past her treatment and she's out the other side. In times of uncertainty, it's possible that we can start walking that path of fear as we become consumed by questions that we don't have answers to, or we begin to look into a future that is unknown to us. And sometimes we can even try to take control back by just holding really tightly onto the things and the people that are most precious to us. But I just want to remind us that in times of uncertainty, the best thing to do is just to choose to walk the path of faith and ask God to increase our measure of faith and to help us through. Faith is when we get to that point where we say, "Lord, I don't know what's ahead, but you do, and I'm going to trust you." Or, "Lord, I don't have all the answers, but I know you do because you've gone ahead of me." Faith is really accepting our humanity and our limitations in the face of God's sovereignty, his wisdom, his strength, his limitless power and love. And faith at its best is when we can get to the stage where we can actually say, "Lord, my life and all that is precious to me is safest in your hands." And we just let go and give it to him. In Hebrews 11, it says that in uncertainty, faith is being certain of what we hope for. And it's about being certain of who we hope in. So our hope is in Jesus. And we know that he's gone before us in life and he's gone before us in death. I always find it really encouraging when I read those verses just before Jesus died and he's talking to his disciples and he said, "Look, I'm going now. I'm going ahead of you. I'm going to go and prepare a place so that where I am one day, you might be also. I mean, what an incredible hope that is, an eternal hope of heaven. So I hope you enjoyed the story today about Mum and our encounter with an angel. And if you are struggling with a sense of, or the weight of anxiety and fear that comes from the uncertainty that we're facing, I just want to encourage you and remind you that God has gone before us. Not only that, but God promises to be with us, and he promises to see us through.